Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you again.
How are you?
I am good, and I am looking forward to this conversation because this is a very interesting article that you shared with me.
Um, uh, let's just jump into this one.
Yeah, it's because this is such a that we of course are going to try to avoid a lot of politics and political conversation about this because as best we can because there is a lot of politics behind this. However,
This is entitled Social Media, Cigarettes, and Cereal.
uh-huh. Now it used to be sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Whoa,
Different.
Bernie, that's so unlike you.
I know,
Uh,
but it's this is the new triplet that we're dealing with.
this is what's becoming important today. And, we all were dragged through the TikTok
Hmm.
ban, drama, the drama of the TikTok ban.
Hmm.
And the Surgeon General issuing a warning. We should put warning labels on social media that it might be dangerous to you. So this is very, very current. Still, that pot is still sort of roiling. It's still sort of active. Um, and so what this article does is it walks us through whether social media is so, I'll use the word dangerous, that it should be banned or that it is bad for you and maybe we should put some restrictions, some type of restrictions on it. Okay. So it goes back to when we talk about cigarettes and cereal. Cigarettes, when in the late 1800s, um, there was a machine that manufactured cigarettes. It was a
Right,
cigarette making machine
right.
that could make them very uniform and very fast. And so the market was flooded with these things. And there was a time when 5 and 6 year old kids, there are photographs of 5 and 6 year old kids smoking
Right.
because they were just so plentiful. Cigarettes were given away in World War II. They were put into K rat or C rations or K rations, and cigarette manufacturers just gave soldiers free cigarettes.
Yeah.
So, because of the dangers involved, and I don't know how they determine the dangers, states as early as 1883 and 1885 and 1886, states began passing laws restricting the sale of cigarettes to minors.
Right.
And by 1890, half the states, I don't know, I guess the other half sold them to to 5 year old kids if they could get the money. But half the states had bans. These were bans that you couldn't sell cigarettes to minors. And I think they still exist today, don't they? I mean,
Right. Well, and I think that, and we'd have to go in and look at the laws and stuff like that. But a lot of times those laws were banning forbidding the sale of cigarettes to minors, not
right,
necessarily the use of cigarettes by minors, but you
right.
could sell them to them. But if the kids had them and was smoking, then that would be, that would be okay. You just
Yeah,
couldn't
it
sell
wasn't the kid who got in trouble, it was the store who got
them.
in
Right.
trouble for selling it to them. So,
Right.
so these are very particular targets here.
Right.
So those were cigarettes, and we see those bans today on cigarettes and alcohol.
Right.
There was an announcement today that an appeals court said, no, it's okay for individuals between the ages of 18 and 20 to buy guns. There
Mhm.
was a ban on
Right.
sales under 21. Now that ban is going to it'll probably go to the Supreme Court and probably be upheld by the Supreme Court that an 18-year-old can go in and buy a gun
Right.
without. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have these laws, these restrictive laws.
Right. And
Then
usually
there's
those
a
laws are there because what they're saying is that but prior to this particular age, whatever this age
Mhm.
is, using such material, using a substance or being exposed to a substance is dangerous to one's health. And
Mhm.
so, not that it's not dangerous to their health after that, but it's considered that after that you can make a decision and you
Right.
can, do that kind of thing. So that's why, alcohol, you got to be 21. You're forbidden from having alcohol prior to the age of 21 because by that age, it's presumed that you're, mature enough and understand enough and your brain is formed enough to
Mhm.
where the effects are less than if you were 8.
Right.
So yeah, there are these bans that forbid things prior to a certain age.
And then there's another whole group of things, and we talk about cereal, and we don't want to pick on one in particular, but you remember Tony the Tiger?
Oh,
Is Tony the Tiger still around? I don't
yeah.
think it is. Is it?
Yeah, he's still around.
Okay.
I mean,
So
we don't
Tony
see
the
commercials
Tiger,
all that much, but
yeah, back in the 50s, I guess, some advertiser came up with this idea of Tony the Tiger was created to sell Frosted Flakes. And at the time, it was about 50% sugar. God, they're very, very sweet. Wonderful cereal. But it wasn't banned.
right,
Instead of banning cereal, we got more nutritional school lunches and nutritional labeling, how many carbohydrates and how many this and how many that. But there were no bans or prohibitions against it.
right.
Okay. So we have two groups of things here: cigarettes, alcohol, medical marijuana. How old do you have to be to get a medical marijuana card? Is it 18 or 21?
I don't know. I think it's different in different states, certainly, but
Okay.
I'm not sure what that is. But it is interesting too, bringing that up because, we were just talking about alcohol, for example. Prior
Yeah.
to the age of 21, alcohol is
Mhm.
after the age of 21, there is a warning.
Okay.
There's a warning on it that says you shouldn't consume this if you're pregnant. You shouldn't consume this if you're operating a machine or,
Mhm.
equipment or something. And
Right.
so but as this author talked about, and as we're, talking about it in this podcast, we have these two groups of, you know, materials or, products that are banned
Mhm.
at
Mhm.
particular ages or for particular reasons. And then we
Right.
have these things where there's just warnings.
Right.
It's sort of like, here's some information that you should know to use at your own risk type of
Right.
thing. And so we have these two categories. And then we have social media.
Yeah, and where do you put social media? Where does social media fit in these two bans? Okay, so right now the states are fighting about marijuana. Marijuana used to be banned completely. You couldn't even do research. Universities couldn't even do research on marijuana because you couldn't buy it. It was illegal to purchase or own marijuana. Well, now to get around that, we have medical marijuana. And so
Mhm.
it's still banned for some age groups, but it's legal for other groups. Okay. So there's these two approaches, banning or warning. And what's being fought right now, the battle that's being waged is where does social media fit? Now, it wasn't so long ago that a woman by the name of Frances Haugen, she was the Facebook data scientist. Remember, she testified at Congress and said that this is that the media, the social media, the machine that Meta has built is generating self harm and self hate,
Right.
especially among vulnerable groups like teenage girls. Okay,
Right.
so she was very clear about that. That yes, this causes serious harm,
Yeah.
and but nobody really did anything about that. But it created this discussion about what should we do about it. But also, parents are worried because they see their children being, they call it addicted to their cell phones or obsessed or distracted by cell phones. And now I think researchers are beginning to agree that, I mean, most of the research coming out today said, yeah, this is probably not good for kids.
Mhm.
They are using it, many children are using it obsessively and excessively. And so, what should we do about it? Um, so, should we do advice or warnings or bans? So, some states have started to issue bans. California, Utah, New York, and in each case, they have been challenged by the industry. Um,
Hmm.
and they've had to back off a little bit of the bans. For
Right.
example, California had one, Utah has one, New York has one, and in each case, they've gone to court. The states have banned them, and then they've gone back to court because they've been challenged the by the social media companies, and so the states have had to back down a little bit. In other countries, for example, Australia, there is an outright ban.
Right.
I think Florida has a ban. You can't, if you're younger than 14, you can't get on without your parents' permission, without your parents' approval.
Yeah, I don't know if that one is completely passed yet, or if they're still working its way through. But those laws, of course, you have this case in Australia, the situation in Australia where these, TikTok and Facebook and different things have been banned. But I think here it's so difficult because, and this is where we try to be careful about
Mhm.
political stuff,
Right.
is we have at one point we argue about free speech and we offer about freedom of press and we talk about, there are those who became very upset back when, Facebook put some restrictions on things because of fake ads and fake information, false information that was being put out there. And so Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, back when it was Twitter, started putting some restrictions on some people's posts because they were saying you can't just disseminate fake information and lies about different
Mhm.
things. And people were saying, well, wait a minute, what about freedom of speech? We can't, if people just want to put information out there or say different things, they should be allowed to do that. But at the same time, then we have these arguments that says, well, but if people are just putting whatever out there and they're creating these algorithms where that's the only information that they're getting,
Mhm.
and these algorithms begin to create the potential for dissent and distrust and conspiracy ideas and conspiratorial ideas and things like that, then perhaps and certainly with TikTok the fear of other unfriendly countries or countries that are not our friends um,
Mhm.
using some of this information against us, then those things should be restricted. And all at the same time, sort of in this culture and climate that we're in, where we have all of these rights and freedoms, and never before have we had arguments about taking some of those rights and freedoms away.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
so it's like this is where the political stuff gets so murky because both sides, in some ways, make decent arguments about
Right.
why something should be allowed or why something shouldn't be
Mhm.
allowed. Um,
Mhm.
and it's so confusing as to where that's going to fall because my impression is that it's not really going to be because it's in the kid's best interest. It's going to be because it's in somebody's political or it's in, somebody's financial best
Right.
interest.
Right. Probably financial.
Right.
Okay. Because what we have to remember, you say, well, yes, let's ban it. Um, in countries where these things are banned, such as certain Middle East countries, China has had bans on this stuff. There are countries that ban social media. That's probably not a good thing. But should we ban it for children? Like what we do with alcohol. Alcohol is allowed in our country, but children are banned from buying. They're prohibited from buying it. So Australia has come up with this approach that if you're under 16, you're banned from any social media, TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, Reddit, X, Instagram. And most Australians agree with the ban.
Right.
Okay. Put a ban on children.
I think
The
I think what's hard about it though is because you start to think of, and I'll use something to relate it, but it's difficult because when you register for those,
Mhm.
when you sign up for some of those accounts, um, a lot of times what they basically do is click here to say that to acknowledge that you are over this age, and so or they'll say put in your birth date, and
Right.
I've seen, 12-year-olds put in and say that they're 45 years old. And it's like, okay. And it's really because they just didn't do the math right to figure out how old they needed to, what year they needed to put in to make it where they were old enough. But so you have that issue. Um, but here in Florida, they recently put a ban and a some restrictions on pornographic websites. And
Um,
what they did was they created their sort of my understanding of it, anyways, is that they're now requiring parents have to upload some or people a user would have to upload some documentation
mhm,
to prove that they are a particular age of age to be able to view that content.
mhm.
And I think that that's an interesting way to do it, but short of something like that, I don't know how you ban it, here in the United States. I don't know how you say, I mean, you can ban it from the perspective of that app is just no longer allowed in an IP address here in the United States. You could do that. But otherwise, you can't
That's
just.
what they wanted to do with TikTok, right?
Right. That's what happened for about 12 hours, I guess,
Right.
infamously, a few weeks ago. Yeah, for about 12 hours, you just couldn't access it because it was shut out.
Right. And TikTok was a national security risk. It wasn't about kids.
Right. Yeah, well,
I
that's what I
mean,
was gonna say. And that's the difference is it wasn't available for anybody.
exactly. Right.
But to try to make it to where it's just not available to people under a particular age, I don't know how you do that in a reasonable way.
And if you think about prohibition,
Mhm.
that's what happened with prohibition is that it was absolutely, but there were these workarounds. Okay.
Mhm.
People found a way to work around and that was a constitutional amendment. But people found a way to work around it. And no doubt they'll find a way to work around
Mhm.
any kind of a ban. Um, so the legal standard, when we talk about bans versus a ban or not to ban, the legal standards is it harmful to children?
Right. We're
Right?
talking about banning something from kids.
Right. Just
Yeah.
from children,
Right.
right? So when we say harmful to children, what do we mean? Well, if it's permanent, like a tattoo or surgery,
Mhm.
or a legal contract, okay?
Yeah.
Anything that's hard to reverse.
Mhm.
So should we have a ban on transgender surgery in children under 18 or 21 or um, because it's permanent. All right. And
Right.
so there's much discussion about that. So when we talk about is it harmful, one is it permanent? The second issue is it addictive?
Right.
So anything that has addictive potential, like nicotine or gambling or pornography or whatever people get addicted to, is it addictive? And the third thing is there a potential for exploitation?
Right.
So young children can't go into certain professions. They can't become, or is it hazardous? We don't want kids working in hazardous workplaces where they
Right.
might get injured. So is it permanent or hard to reverse? Is it addictive? And could they be exploited? But in addition to the legal standards, there's a second um, there's a second consideration, and that is it possible that parents can just control this themselves? And
Right.
that's where cereal comes in. You don't have to buy the cereal,
Right.
just inform yourself. And if you think that Frosted Flakes are bad for your kids because it has a high sugar content, then you just don't buy them. All
Right.
right. And kids aren't going to go buy them themselves. They're not going to go, they'll go to their friends' houses and they'll eat that stuff. But this is something parents can't control
Mhm.
social media. It's
Right.
it's beyond their control to do anything. And so you have on the one hand you have harmful to children. On the other hand, is can parents control the whatever it is? Okay.
Yeah. And I think that, yeah, social media falls in some strange spaces with that because, as you said earlier, there is some evidence that it could be somewhat harmful because we have, the whistleblower who said that, particular populations are being targeted. with particular ads that could affect their mental health and even their physical health. We have, kids being exposed to material that is inappropriate for their age in general. And it is really difficult for parents to control it. Now, I think that there are strategies that are being used to address some of those things. Like, for example, there are phones now where, and there's operating systems now where parents can generally lock the phones down to where a kid cannot, on their that device anyways,
Right.
cannot access apps without parent approval. Um,
Hmm.
you know, obviously kids become savvy and find ways online to get around that sometimes. But if a parent is staying on top of it and monitoring it, they can sort of have some ability to limit exposure to some of that stuff. So I think that technology is trying to keep up with some of that, but otherwise, it's really difficult as parents to prevent access to some of that material.
Right. So the question becomes, as we work through these various issues, is social media more like cigarettes or more like Frosted Flakes? Should we ban it or should we? And um, parents are beginning, when we talk about the parent issue, parents are increasingly concerned about their children's use of cell phones and social media.
Right.
From a legal standpoint, legally,
Hmm.
platforms such as Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and X probably are more like tobacco because parents can't control it. I mean, I don't know that parents can exercise enough control because not only will kids get workarounds, but the industry will give them workarounds.
Hmm.
Age verification. They can get a fake ID.
Right.
It's just very difficult for parents to say, I choose not to buy that,
Mhm.
like a box of cereal.
Right.
And then you have another issue that's percolating, and again, we have to talk about what's really happening. Elon Musk paid $44 billion for X. Uh,
Hmm.
and we know who his best friend is now. Okay. So I would guess that Musk and other, Mark Zuckerberg just gave Trump $25 million for banning him from
Hmm.
that. I'm guessing that these individuals who are close to the president are going to have some influence over this decision. I mean,
Well,
one must assume.
it is because it's not surprising that, in during Trump's initial first um, tenure as president, you know, he was pushing for the ban, a ban on TikTok,
Mhm.
and he was really working to try to get TikTok banned.
Mhm.
And so it is interesting now, and other things may have changed. So, we're certainly not attributing it all to this, but it is interesting that now that he and Elon Musk are close, and now that he and
Mark Zuckerberg are
Mark
close.
Zuckerberg are close.
Mhm.
Now he is sort of the champion of bringing TikTok back. That 12 hours or so that TikTok was gone, when it came back, there was as soon as you opened it up, there was a little note there that said, "We want to thank President Trump for his efforts to allow TikTok back in the United States." So it is interesting that so we have to look at that because I think that in some ways owners of other social media groups like X and like Meta or Facebook and Instagram and stuff, we have to in some ways assume that there's some anxiety there that says if TikTok is banned, what could be next?
Mhm.
And that's a source of income for them and a source of their
But
work.
TikTok is a litk bit different than the others in that
Sure.
it is a national security risk. I mean, it's a potential for national security risk. And when Trump says, "Well, we're gonna reinstate TikTok and make a deal," That sounds like that sounds like there's going to be some money on the table, and if we can work a deal out that
Hmm.
people can make money, you know, so you worry a little bit. So these are also political decisions, and
Right.
that's the other thing about one of the things this article says is that many times these, what you have to remember is decisions are made in historical context, in a social context, so that when cigarettes were banned for young children, it was the same time that alcohol was being banned. The temperance movement was very strong, whereas nutritional benefits were brought up right after Watergate, and people didn't trust the government as much because of Watergate. And so politics will play a role in this decision making.
Right.
It's going to be made within a political context, and with these, one of the things we've been seeing is that the social media companies have gotten very close to the president. They've been, invited to the inauguration, and they play a role, and they're giving money, and they're sort of falling into line. So these decisions are also going to be made within a particular political context, which they always are. It's just
Right.
that this is the political context we have right now.
Right. So I guess we come down to us, it comes down to whether or not it should be banned or just some warnings placed on it. I am certainly of the opinion that, you know, a lot of this, you know, for fear of sounding curmudgeoned, um, I think that a lot of this does, in my perspective, fall to the parents. As
Yeah.
parents, we need to be responsible for what our kids are doing.
Hmm.
Um, if you don't want your kids on some of these things, there are decisions that you can absolutely make
Hmm.
to to put as many limits as possible on
Hmm.
on that. Now, are there workarounds? There are always going to be workarounds. If
Correct.
if your kid was technologically savvy enough to go out and buy a VPN that puts their IP address in Canada or South America somewhere, they're going to have access to it again because the system is going to think that's where they are.
Hmm.
So there are always going to be workarounds, and because that information is out there, and because we can't, I don't think that it's possible to put so many restrictions on some of these things that the American people are going to allow it to get to that level. I
Hmm.
mean, the amount of restrictions that would be necessary are going to be far beyond what any of us are going to be comfortable with. So
That's
I
right.
think it's going to come down to parents saying, no, this isn't going to happen. No, I'm not going to let my kids have access to this. And so I'm not going to let them have a phone, or I'm going to give them a flip phone. So all they can do is call and text. Um, and they don't have internet access or something like that. Parents are going to have to get to that point, and it may be unwelcomed by their teenagers or their kids. But if you want to have that, if you feel that it's that important to have that kind of control, I think that that's what you're going to have to do. I don't know another way that there's another way around that.
A few days ago, we did a podcast on parental responsibility at every age. Well, where this is playing out today is what do you do about computers, iPads, cell phones? And you're absolutely right that regardless of what they've, even in Australia, where you have a total ban for 16, I'm sure those kids are working feverishly to get around that ban, and they're going to succeed. Um, it will ultimately be the parents' responsibility. You have to be involved in this. For example, kids should not be taking their cell phones to bed with them, period. I don't care what stupid excuse they give you that it's their alarm clock or they have music or it's their white noise. No, that's all BS. They're on their phones at night when they should be sleeping. So they shouldn't have their phones in their room at any age.
Right.
Okay.
Because if they were really just using it for that purpose, if you said, I'll just get you another alarm,
Yeah.
they should say, oh, okay, that'll be great.
Right.
But if they're still fighting it, then okay, there may be another reason.
Right. And if kids aren't getting up in the morning, it's because they're staying up late at night and they're probably on their phones. Okay. So please, common sense here. Second, there should be no phone zones in the house. They shouldn't be able to bring their phones to the kitchen table. They shouldn't be able to use their phones at certain times of the day. There should be family activities where there are no phones. If you go to a restaurant, leave phones in the cars. You have to, parents have the obligation to restrict the use of these devices. Nobody else can do that. You can't ask a money-making company to say, okay, we want you to take care of this. You can't ask the government. You can't pass this responsibility on to anybody else. It is your responsibility to, you don't have to give your 10-year-old a cell phone. They can function without it.
Right.
No 10-year-old needs a cell phone.
Right.
We give it to them because we can. And
Right.
then you can't monitor it. You lose control of what they're doing. So when you give them the cell phone, if you connect it to the internet, if they take it to their bedrooms, if they use it at dinner time, if they have their phone on while they're doing homework, those are things that parents can control.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that that's so from my perspective and maybe our perspective, um, it does come down to the parents, and I think that there should be warnings, and let's be honest, there are warnings.
There are
I
warnings,
think
right?
that most people click OK very quickly before they look at those warnings, but that's
Right.
what it is.
Do you agree? I agree, right?
Yeah.
Whoever reads those.
Right. And so, but this is a lot of this is going to be about the parent-child relationship and how
Right.
you manage some of these things with your kids. So
That's
we'll
right. And it starts, I mean, I said in an earlier podcast that I have these new grandchildren, and I don't know what their parents' plans are for introducing media, but they're it's pretty easy to hand a kid a cell phone when you're in the grocery store or when you're in the car or. Um,
yeah,
so this is going to take some planning.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
And so we'll keep talking about it, and whenever new information comes out, we'll share it. So,
Right.
all right, well, that's it for today. Until
Okay.
next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.